Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Now, on today's show, we're going to be talking about using cybersecurity as a differentiator. Now, joining me in the studio is Darren Chapman. He's a cybersecurity specialist. Interesting area, this. I mean, we've looked at GDPR over the past couple of months and the impact that GDPR had. But when it comes to cybersecurity, is it something that is within your organisation a necessity? Is it something that you feel you need to do and it's just a cost? Or is it something that once you've done it, you can then go to your customers and say, actually, we are cyber secure, so your data is going to be safe with us, but because of that, we can charge a little extra. I mean, is there a value in your cyber security? Could be an interesting show. Told you so, didn't I? Darren, it's lovely to have you with us. So is that right, what I'm saying there? Do you find a lot of people just see it as a necessity when it comes to cyber security? Or do you think there is a value in being cyber secure within a business?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people do see it as a cost. And like you say, a necessity. I think there is an opportunity to differentiate your business if you're really putting, particularly customers now, in terms of customer data. If you're putting that first and really making that sort of central to your what you're doing with security, then I think there is an opportunity there to use that as a differentiator.
Tell me a little bit about your business before we get into the nitty-gritty of this Cyberscale. What's that all about then?
Yeah, so Cyberscale is a business I started about a year ago, and we're focused on cybersecurity for SME businesses, really. So taking some of the approaches that enterprise businesses use in terms of looking at security from a business level rather than IT level, looking at the overall strategy based on risk rather than looking at just perhaps technical solutions and throwing those at problems and trying to bring that to the SME.
So yours
market.
is a more strategic approach then to resolving the issue. When you go into small businesses, do you actually find that are they making the same mistake repeatedly? Do they put any value on it? Do they just see it as something necessary that they need to do? I mean, what do you find when you go in that is the most common issue?
Quite often there's a lot of assumption. So there's assumptions around, for instance, that it's just an IT issue. So that leads to maybe just looking for technical solutions to a problem and not taking into account the people and the process elements within the business.
So what do you think the biggest mistake is that people are making? Is it the fact that they go out and they buy a piece of software, they stick it on, they think they're now cyber secure, or is it just a lack of understanding?
I think it's both. I think that assumption comes into it quite a lot. I think we talked before, and one of these things is you don't know what you don't know. So particularly in a small business, you're focused on running your business. You're not focused on, you're focused on cybersecurity. So and it's not an easy area. There's a lot to it. So technical solutions is one area, but more and more nowadays you need to be having more things in place than just technical solutions.
Fundamentally then, what do you think the biggest issue is going to be out there? Is it that we don't put the protection in that we need? Is it that we don't recognise or identify the issues or the problems that we may have, the vulnerabilities that we have in our system? And even if it's what you said a moment ago, that you don't know what you don't know. And when you go in there, what is the most common words that come out of your mouth then? Is it a case of, well, you don't have this particular firewall, you're not doing this particular kind of procedure? What's the most common issue?
I think the most common issue is not really having a good understanding of what it is you're trying to protect in your business, and that's really the starting point. So, if you take data for instance, right, and data is a lot of times that's what we're really focused on when it comes to security. You might have lots of different types of data in your business, and that data has different value. And therefore you need to put different levels of protection around that. But until you understand what it is and the risks to it and the impact of it not being available or being compromised in some way, until you have a really good understanding of that, it's difficult to make informed decisions about where you spend your budget, where you spend your time.
Is it easy to drift from data security into business continuity? It seems the two are very, very close together, because I would imagine when you talk about cybersecurity, people are thinking all the time about data being stolen or machines being hacked. We had the NHS situation, probably about a year ago now, where, I mean, they were held to ransom. What are the most common threats that businesses are experiencing out there or should be protected against?
So ransomware is a big one. It remains to be a big one. It's, you know, a lot of and also financial. So financial fraud in terms of things like email-based invoice fraud. See a lot of that.
It's interesting because I was dealing with a business just recently, and that was exactly what they were saying, that they were actually lengthening the number of days before they pay, because it gives them an opportunity within their business to have systems that will capture people who come along and go, you've got to pay this much money, you've got to pay it now or else. Those kind of systems. So it isn't just electronic cyber attacks we're talking about. It's the whole philosophy behind cybersecurity and just normal security, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the majority of attacks that come in nowadays, a lot of them by email, and those emails are there's technical elements to them, but there's a lot of people elements to them as well. So when you get these emails through, like you just said, right, the people are cyber criminals are playing on urgency. They're playing on the fact that people are busy. You know, they're not necessarily taking enough attention to the emails that they're looking at and doing, you know, checks on them because they're busy, because they're under pressure. So the psychology comes into it hugely. It really has changed over the last few years. If you're looking back now 4 years ago, 3 years ago even, how have the attacks changed and the processes that we need to implement into a business? Because many businesses will be still doing what they did yesterday and the day before and 3 years ago to protect their data. They're not really moving along because it's not an important part of the business in their mind's eye. Yeah. So how has it changed? Both the ways that we protect ourselves and the ways that the threats have changed. Yeah, so if you go back, probably a few more years than that, but what you used to have was a situation where in a business you would have a certain amount of data. Your data, for the most part, would be contained, so it would be within your business. So it might be on servers, which would be in your office or your data center. And so the way that you would protect that would be to protect that data from people getting in and protect it from getting out. So you would be thinking of firewalls, and then obviously you've got things like antivirus, etc. But you're looking at perimeter security, really. That's how we used to do security.
So it's all moving around here quite freely, but once it gets to the outside world or outside your office walls, that's where these firewalls are then.
That's right. So you stop people from getting in to your perimeter and you stop the data from getting out. So that's how we used to do things. Obviously now data is everywhere, right? Your data is everywhere, and part of that is because that's what we do, that's what we need to do to make businesses agile. So we have people out on the road, we have people working from home, and it's great to enable that, and it can be a business differentiator to have that flexibility. But that comes with challenges. The data is no longer contained. It's in Dropbox, it's in Box, it's in OneDrive if you're using Microsoft Office 365. There's all sorts of ways of sharing data. Email is a key one. Everybody has email on their devices, not only their laptops, but also their phones, their tablets. If you allow that from a corporate perspective, which lots of people do, then that's another copy of data. There's attachments in there that reside well outside sometimes the area that you've got control over as a business.
See, I find it fascinating because we're expecting small businesses, medium-sized, even large businesses to have data security against cyber attacks, yet we hear regularly that the big blue chip companies, NASA, America's national defense computer is hacked into. Is it a bit of a task that really the best thing to be is to be unimportant, unobtrusive, keep your name and your brand below the wire so that people will feel it's not worth attacking you? Because it does sound like that anybody, it doesn't matter how good the security systems are, there is always going to be vulnerabilities. Would you say that was true?
It's definitely true. And one thing I'll say is security is hard. It's and it gets harder all the time, and it changes every day. And we're talking about in some cases well organised criminal enterprises that are doing the hacking and trying to get data. And
well, I was going to ask you, what is the motivation behind it? I mean, you read sometimes that the motivation is because they can. And then the other motivation is money, of course, when you have the ransomware. But what do you see as the key motivations behind?
I mean, mainly financial, but there are different motivations. You're right. Some of it is kind of kudos amongst people in a hacking kind of fraternity, if you like. Some of it is financial. That's a lot of it, and some of it is very well organised. And some of it's, you've also got nation state to think about, things like that as well.
Do you think it is on the rise? Is it becoming more prevalent?
Yeah, I would say so.
So it's on the increase. So something that, well worth on this particular program, I think, actually sitting back and analysing, maybe just, even if it's no more than just opening up your mind's eye so that you start thinking about the problems, but are you still doing what you did 3, 4, 5 years ago? Is it just is it very simple that you've got McAfee or you've got Norton on your machine or one of the other antiviruses, and that's the way that you're actually protecting your data? Do you run a server network within your organisation where people externally have got access to it? How do people keep and collect data if you've got a call centre or something like that? We're going to be talking more about this as the show goes on. My guest on today's show is Darren Chapman, cybersecurity specialist, and he comes from Cyberscale. More to come on this edition of Business Connections Live. It's lovely to have your company as always. We're live here on a Monday, spot on time today. Hey, what's that all about? Let's go back a couple of weeks. By the way, we'd like to apologise. No show last week. We were all out in Barcelona doing a big global event. Well, some of us were, I've just been told, but we were all out there in Barcelona. If it's any consolation to you, it rained for 4 days. But there were a couple of days where it was very hot and lovely and sunny. But apart from that, neither here nor there. Let's go back a couple of weeks to the last show that was live with Susan Armstrong. She's an international speaker, best-selling author and award-winning talent development expert. We were talking about how to lead like a CEO, an important aspect in any business. Do you manage by fear within your organization? Are people fearful of you from afar? Are you a shouter? Do you holler at people? Or do you just get their trust, their loyalty, because you're just damn good at what you do? Good show. He highlighted some of the issues that some organisations and some leaders have. And remember, it may not be your fault. You may be promoted to a level of leadership. It's called the Peter Principle, is that you're promoted to your level of incompetence. That may well have happened to you. It's not your fault, but what kind of problems is it causing within your organisation? Good show. Just to give you some of the highlights, let's go back a couple of weeks to the last edition of Business Connections Live. Got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about how to lead like a CEO. It's one of the big topics that a lot of mainstream organizations end up looking at. Leadership within their business. Joining me in the studio is Susan Armstrong. She's an international speaker, best-selling author and award-winning talent development expert who specializes in leadership skills for large organizations.
A lot of the times we don't have good role models as a leader. I think a lot of us can think, and certainly when you're of a certain age. So I see this changing within the younger generations. Thanks to people like me traveling around the world teaching this, our leadership abilities are getting better. There's a difference between a manager and a leader. Okay, so back in the old days, because let's face it, I'm not young anymore, a manager was a separate role to a leader. Managers manage things. They set objectives, they deploy resources, they manage budgets, but it's a very practical, tangible thing, management. It's very hands-on. Leadership is an art. So the thing that I see that is very pervasive in all organizations, no matter how big or small, most people in leadership positions have never been taught how to do it. These principles, they aren't just for those big guys with, 180,000 plus employees. Concept is the concept. People will do what you want them to do if they want to be like you, if you're a good leader. So the one pervasive thing I see, regardless of the level, regardless of the size of the organization, regardless of the individual, is none of us have ever been taught to do this. And I figured that out very early on. I mean, I made some profound mistakes when I was a young manager. The bottom line, it's about profitability. So leadership absolutely equates to profitability. So, we all know this. Okay?
It's all about money, isn't it?
It really is. But in between the leadership and the profitability, it's about engagement, it's about productivity. So I'm going to put it to you this way, and I'll put it to the listeners this way. You think about the best boss you have ever had. If that boss asked you to work overtime, would you have? If they asked you to come in on a weekend, would you have? The best boss you've ever had, you would do whatever they asked. Why? Because you really truly believed they cared about you and had your best interest at heart. So one of my arguments is always that we're running organizations in 2018 with human resource practices that belong in 1955. If your employees respect you, if they trust you, if they want to follow you, they're going to work hard for you. I'm Susan Armstrong. I'm a professional speaker and international talent development expert. So I custom design training programs and seminars for organizations around the world in everything to do with leadership and people. And this issue of leadership starts with you. You actually know, each of us knows what a good leader looks like just based on our favorite boss. So we know what they did that made us want to follow them. The hard part is putting this into practice. So you can actually go to your employees or those around you and ask them, what makes you a good leader and where do you need to improve? And no, this isn't easy, and I would never tell you that this is, but we all have to start somewhere. You can also find some training, read a book, go to a workshop. None of us went to school to be a leader. None of us were taught how to do this. So if we don't know, how do we know? If we don't know, we can't possibly know. So you can join a workshop, join a training program. Please, you can email me at susanarmstrongtraining@gmail.com, and that will get directly to me. So that's susanarmstrongtraining@gmail.com. I'm happy to have a conversation about workshops or seminars that might be appropriate for you. Or you can go to escapeyourinvisibleprison.com and you can sign up to download 3 free videos on developing that self-awareness and that confidence in yourself. So that's escapeyourinvisibleprison.com. We will need your email address to know where to send the videos, but you can download 3 free videos that will help you with the self-awareness piece, the confidence and communication piece.
Susan Armstrong there, an absolutely fantastic show. If you are finding yourself that you're now in that leadership role, I mean, are leaders made, is it nurture or is it nature? Never quite certain, but there are some great leaders out there, and let's face it, you've probably worked in your lifetime for some leaders who haven't been that good. There was once an expression, or there was once a quote from somebody that said, you will find psychopaths in 2 places. One of them will be in prison, the other place you'll find the psychopath will be as a leader of an organization, because the characteristics are very similar. I'm not insulting anybody here. That's just something that a research doctor actually said, and I read the article. It just made me laugh out loud. Fascinating show. If you want to find out maybe how to improve your leadership skills, you can download those videos, or you can watch the entire program with Susan. By the way, if you'd like a program like this one for your own organisation, or if you'd like to if you're sending out newsletters at the moment and you'd like to turn your readers into viewers, now how good's that's going to be? They reckon within 5 years that most websites will be like multimedia television channels. So if yours is a flat website at the moment where there's loads and loads of stuff to read, everybody goes on about this short attention span that we have. Well, why not turn it into video content? Talk to us about that, and we can advise you and we can help you as well. It's dead easy to do that. All you got to do, drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com. If you wish, though, pick the phone up and let's have a chat on 01784 256 777. You can always follow our stream of consciousness if you're watching on Twitter at the moment at BCL Business TV. If you hashtag BCL Business TV, you can also sort of send us a question as well. Hello, I'll get there eventually. You can watch the program and comment as well on our Facebook page. But don't forget, over 300 hours of great business advice, all for free, if you go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com. You're watching Business Connections Live. On today's show, we're talking about cybersecurity, using cybersecurity as a differentiator in your business. My guest on today's program is Darren Chapman. He's a cybersecurity specialist, and his company's name is Cyberscale. Once again, lovely to have you with us.
Thank you.
We're just interested. The whole area is fascinating, and I'm just trying to, just so many questions to ask. What would you say the 5 cybersecurity fundamentals are for most businesses? What should they be approaching? What should they be thinking about? And how do they implement them?
So I think the first one we've already touched on, which is really understanding what it is you're trying to protect. So understand what your business is doing. Obviously, you'll know that as a business owner, but also understand what data you have and what systems you have to access that data. And once you've look at the data specifically, so what types of data do you have? Is it something that's really critical to your business? Some of it will be, some of it won't.
So it's the scalability of the data. I would say, we were talking here, we generate thousands of terabits, hundreds of terabits, not thousands, hundreds of terabits of assets, video assets that we've got. So that is fundamental to our business. If we were to lose that, that would cause us a lot of problem. But we also have customer information as well.
Yep.
And it's reputational with customer. Obviously, the business couldn't operate without it, but that customer data is very important to what we do here too. Do you have to look at the different types of assets that you have and data that you have to make certain you have the appropriate protection in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're looking at data specifically in security, there's 3 aspects of data, and this is the second fundamental really. There's 3 aspects of that data that we're interested in. So confidentiality is the first. So is the data only available to those people who should have access to it? That's the first. Second is integrity. So is the data actually what it should be, what we expect it to be? Has it been altered in some way? So obviously, if you think of something like banking transactions or financial data, for instance, if that's been altered in some way, then that can have a huge bearing. And the third is availability. So is the data available to you when you need it? So some types of data will be, you might have some historic sales data, for instance. So that may not, if you don't have access to that for a week, that may not cause a big problem to your business. But if you have data on your customers and you need that data to be able to service your customers, then you might need that data. You might need that immediately. So actually, not having that data available for a few hours may have a huge impact on your business. And also, if that data is released to somebody, and made available to people who shouldn't have it, particularly if it's personal data or even worse, sensitive data, then again, reputationally, that has a huge bearing on your business.
Are we in a bit of a chicken and egg situation here at the moment, in as much as I said, we've got terabits of information. You can't, to store that securely in the cloud is going to take weeks, if not months, to actually upload it, get it up there. Have we got that we're carrying all this information, all this data within our businesses, but the actual technology is not there to store it, off-site, to store it securely off-site without maybe having a physical copy of it that is locked in a safe somewhere. And in fact, it's the old ways of doing things that will actually give us a security of continuity afterwards.
Well, they certainly shouldn't be overlooked. Having backups that are available to you without a network connection, for instance, an internet connection, that's one way of recovery. But But when you store data locally, obviously then you've got to look at the other side of the security. So one side of the security is the continuity aspect and being able to restore it. But the other side is actually if that data's or the hardware that you're storing that data on is not physically secured well, then if there's a break into your premises, then that's another way that people can get access to your data. So it's really about going back to understanding what your requirements are, what you need to protect, which data is really important, which isn't, and then when you understand that, then you can really start to make some informed decisions about the solutions that you put in place.
When we look at the old NHS issue, we will go back to the 5 fundamentals in a minute, but when you look at the old NHS situation there, that was delivered by emails and that was ransomware that they were talking about there. But shall we look at some of the breaches like TalkTalk, for instance? Do the issues start to arise when you do start saving it? We'll call it the cloud, but when you're saving in off-site servers, is that where the security issues are? You're using a third party and somewhere along the line you're going to be sending data to and from them. And that means that then you've got to somehow be in control of the off-site server security as well. And in addition to that question, and there is a question here somewhere, and in addition to that, of course, if you've got a server in your own premises, that's going to be easier for you to secure.
There's a lot of questions there.
Yeah, a lot of questions.
I don't know which one.
So you just sort them all out for yourself, right? I'll just sit back for 15 minutes now and listen.
Okay. So let's talk about moving. Let's talk about moving data to the cloud. And this is actually when we talked about assumptions earlier on. This is one of the ones that I see a lot, particularly in small businesses and medium-sized businesses. So there is sometimes an assumption that if you move your data to the cloud, then immediately you're secure. That's all you need to worry about. And there are some aspects of, if you compare moving your data to the cloud to having it on a server in your office, then there are some aspects of that which are more secure. So typically, you've got a certain amount of we talked about protecting the perimeter of your business and your data earlier on. So there's things that you would have in place to do that. Some of them might be done well, some of them might not be done so well. If you move that data to the cloud, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Amazon, obviously all these companies spend millions of pounds every year protecting that data when it's in the data center. So from the perspective of the data being on a server in the data center and somebody trying to get at it while it's on that server, you could probably say it is going to be more secure. That said, that's
well done, by the way. That's 2 of the questions. Tick
excellent.
And tick.
How many have I got to go?
I think you've got 2 more to go.
2 more. Okay. So it's on a server in the cloud. That's quite well protected. Although, having said that, there are again, you've got some responsibility as an organisation as to some of the processes that you put around that and some of the configuration. So it's a shared responsibility. We can kind of get back to that. But the other thing that I wanted to say is that that's one copy of that data, and I think this is the one thing that people often overlook when they talk about moving data to the cloud. So yes, it's on a server in a data center that might be well protected by Microsoft, for instance. But if you use OneDrive and your staff have laptops which have OneDrive and they're synchronizing that data so that they have it available to them when they're not connected to the internet, that's another copy of that same data. If that data is sensitive, personal, confidential, that's another point where that data can be compromised. And cyber criminals are always going to look for the weakest link. The weakest link's not going to be trying to hack the Google data center. It's going to be getting access to your device which has got a synchronized copy of that data.
Are people the weakest link?
People can be the weakest link. They can also be a really good asset to your business. If you have a good user awareness program, if you invest in that, if you invest in helping them understand why the processes and the policies and the systems that you put in place are important.
Let's go down the 5 fundamentals then, and we'll actually do it by numbers. That way I won't sidetrack you. Number 1 then is? So
number 1 was understand what it is you're trying to protect and the implications of not doing it and the impacts to your business, and also the impacts to anybody who you're keeping data on behalf of, so client data. understand the implications upon them.
Number two.
Number two is CIA, so that's confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data. Understanding that. Number three is people, process, and technology. So we talked earlier on about traditionally perhaps an over-reliance on technical solutions. People and process elements of security are just as important, if not more important, than the technical solutions. So when we talk about people, we're talking about those user awareness programs, helping people understand why it's important. Processes are important as well. So your processes within your business, which will sometimes be guided by policies as well. So processes for actually onboarding users and deleting user accounts when they leave the business. Processes for checking whether when somebody asks you by email to transfer some money, you might need a manual process in place to just do a double check on that can't be overcome easily by technology. So all of those things are really important. So that was three, I think. Number four, I would say balance and pragmatism.
Now, what do you mean by that?
So balance and pragmatism is really, and I think this is something that's really important in security, and it's been sometimes overlooked historically. When you put things in place to make your business more secure, your data, your systems more secure, that can lead to frustration, and it can lead to a loss of agility in your business. So if I put something in place that makes it really difficult to access data, so I have to jump through lots of hoops to get it, that might make it more secure. It probably will. But if we do that in such a way that it makes my staff really frustrated at how long it takes, they're going to become frustrated. They're not going to be as effective, and more, they're probably going to find ways around that and circumvent those things that we've put in place, which is a bigger problem. We call that shadow IT. And so you really have to balance the security aspects with the
so it doesn't
with
get
the
in the way of the working structure within the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really about understanding that balance and putting the right one in place for your business. And sometimes you'll accept a level of risk, because it's not a high risk. It is a risk, but it's not necessarily a high risk. And to put something in place to mitigate it would make things too hard and would make you less effective as a business.
And do we have a 5?
We do have a 5. The 5 ones, number 5 is prevention is far, far better than cure. And I think I talk to a lot of businesses who have had some kind of compromise, and it's not until that happens that they've started to look at the preventative side, and they wish they had done that earlier.
Stable, door.
Yeah, absolutely. The other aspect, though, I would say is prevention is far better than cure, but secondly, you're not going to prevent everything, right? You're never going to make yourself 100% secure. So being able to manage that, manage an incident, manage a data breach, understand what you have to do to manage that in advance of it happening is a key part of your security strategy as well. So have an incident response plan, have a data breach response plan so that you know how to deal with it.
Hope you're finding today's programme of interest to you. If you are sitting there at the moment, you're thinking about putting your cybersecurity strategy in place. Hopefully today will give you some indications of the right way to move forward. My guest is Darren Chapman. He's a cybersecurity specialist, and his business is Cyberscale. More from Darren in just a few moments' time on this edition of Business Connections Live. The banks have been in the news just recently, and we had Troy Norcross on the programme a little while back. We were talking about blockchain. Of course, could blockchain replace the traditional bank or the banking institutions, the way that banking is done? As we know, that was one question that came up in the programme. If you're not familiar with blockchain, you probably heard the words bandied around over the last couple of months. But if you're not familiar with it, I do recommend very highly that you watch the entire programme at Troy. He gives a very clear explanation of what blockchain is all about. We felt it kind of fits in rather nicely with this particular program because it's all around the whole world of cybersecurity really, and how you can make absolutely certain that you, by using blockchain, that a number of things stay in check with each other. If you missed the program, then don't forget, to go to our website at businessconnectionslive.com. But just to give you a bit of a tease, here were the key takeaways from Troy on that particular edition of Business Connections Live.
So when you're thinking about blockchain, if you think about it as simple as an Excel sheet that's shared with lots of different people, you can put a variety of pieces of information in that, and it's trusted because everybody has an identical copy of that. That's the first thing, that kind of what is blockchain, that you can explain to just about anybody. The second thing is the reason that DLT, distributed ledger technology, works best is across multiple distrusting parties. Because everybody has an identical copy, they don't have to trust each other, and in many cases they don't. So we say that blockchain is the platform for co-opetition. People that wouldn't normally trust each other because they're competitors are suddenly cooperating. We also talk about the fact that blockchain is for industries more than for companies. If you're building a blockchain just for yourself, you are by default centralized. And if you're centralized, you may as well just use a database. And those are the top 3 things that we at Blockchain Rookies want to help people understand, not just consumers, but also small and medium-sized and even large-sized enterprises. My name's Troy Norcross. I'm co-founder of Blockchain Rookies, and I really have appreciated being on the show today.
Troy Norcross there, talking about blockchain. A great show. What is blockchain? Using simple explanations and real-world examples. He also helped to separate blockchain from Bitcoin. So if you get confused by the two, there is a clear explanation of what that's all about. It's all based on his experience. He's the CEO of Open Goods. He also explained how to use and to create incremental business value using blockchain as well. Great show. If you don't know what you were just saying, actually, when you've watched that one as well, haven't you?
Yeah, very good.
It's a really fascinating area, isn't it? The whole thing about blockchain. Are you getting involved with blockchain in your businesses?
No, not really. I'm just not yet. Obviously, you have to have an awareness of it, and there's certainly some security possibilities with it, and with a lot of emerging disruptive technologies, there's things that need to be thought about from a security perspective as well.
I don't think it's a way to get rich quick at the moment, but I think it was. There's a few people out there where they were doing the Bitcoin mining. But once again, Bitcoin and blockchain, they're often said in the same breath, but of course they are worlds apart. One is a vehicle for the other. And not completely exclusive to each other. Anyway, great show. If you do want to check it out, just go to the website at businessconnectionslive.com. Just tap in on the search page, Troy Norcross, just Troy actually, and you'll find the program in no time at all. Really, really good show. Really enjoyed doing that one. And Troy just has the most amazing Mr. Voiceover voice that you can possibly get. So that's Troy Norcross. You're watching Business Connections Live. Darren Chapman is my guest today. He's a cybersecurity specialist. His business is Cyberscale, and what they do, they go into organizations just like yours, and they work with you to put together a cohesive, comprehensive strategy on how and what you should be doing when it comes to the cybersecurity within your business. And the thing that we kind of touched on in the whole introduction to this program is that has a value. If you can say that you are, you're cyber secure, that's going to give your customers that good feeling about your business. And maybe, perhaps, you can actually charge a little bit additional for that. We'll show you his website in just a few moments' time. But before we do that, let's find out a bit more. The big talk recently, of course, has been GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. There was a lot of fuss about it, and one would imagine that it happened and it's gone away now. It's all behind us. GDPR no longer is of any consequence or importance. But when we're talking about GDPR, that is fundamental, isn't it? GDPR, data protection, and that's an ongoing issue, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a huge crossover, and my experience is that, and I was involved in quite a lot of looking at GDPR, in the run up to May. My experience is that a lot of organisations have done some things around GDPR.
They've done something.
But a lot of those who have really focused on the marketing aspects of it. So they've really looked at, the customer database. Have they got a privacy notice? Are they sending things to people who haven't asked for it? Have they got the right consent? That kind of thing. And those things are important. But they've kind of stopped there. And there's a huge aspect of cybersecurity embedded within GDPR, and it's really all about, all of GDPR is about taking responsibility for your clients, your employees' data, and part of that responsibility is when you have it and you have the right reasons for having it and you've articulated that correctly, you've got a duty of care over that data to keep it safe, and I think a lot of organisations haven't got to grips with that yet.
Do you think a lot of organisations are just playing lip service to it?
I think they are, yes, and I think a lot are playing a wait and see game to
see who gets fined first, how small they'll be, and whether it's going to implement or affect them.
Yes. Yeah, and I think, and it's particularly...
It's a bit like waiting to see if you're going to be burgled, and once you're burgled, then I'm going to get the burglar alarm.
And going back to exactly what we said about cybersecurity, very, very similar. Sometimes people don't see it as important until something's gone wrong. So it's
Do you think across the board, is there a cost to this? And when I say that, to industry in general, cybersecurity, yes, you've got to pay to have it done, but is there actually a cost that they're affected by on the bottom line when it does go wrong? What kind of money are we talking about across?
Could be huge. I mean, there's lots of different aspects to a cybersecurity issue, an incident, or a data breach, which may arise from an incident. So you may have the first one is kind of direct financial loss. Okay, so if it's some kind of fraud or it's ransomware related, for instance, then you may have a direct financial loss. You may have fines from different organisations. So
and there can be a lot these days.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about GDPR, but if you look at Tesco's bank recently, that was an FCA investigation. They've actually been fined a lot of money from the FCA for not keeping data secure. So it's not just
300 million
GDPR.
plus, I understand.
So it's not just GDPR that you have to think about from that point of view. The third one is reputational damage, and this actually can be huge. Particularly if it's a data breach and it's all its financial loss to your clients, the reputational loss to your business can be something that you don't recover from.
And of course, with GDPR, we were always talking about, it isn't just about your business, it's about your suppliers, it's about where the data or the information or where the product goes on to afterwards. It's about that correlation of all those different aspects. So is that an area that we need to be aware of when it comes to our data, our cyber security, that whole supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that's becoming more and more of a factor. And it goes back to something we were talking about earlier on. So I talked about weakest link when we were talking about data and where someone would look as a cyber criminal to attack or to compromise. Supply chain is very similar. So if you're a large enterprise and you're putting lots of money into security and you've got lots of protections in place and you're doing all the right things, you have a bunch of suppliers perhaps who might be involved in logistics, they might be involved in taking orders, and in some cases you'll have systems that are integrated with those suppliers, and those suppliers might be quite small and they may not have the security budgets and the capabilities that you have. So that's a potential way in for cyber criminals. If they can compromise there and then work their way up the supply chain into your larger business, that's another way in. So that's becoming more of a factor. Larger businesses are understanding that. They're putting things in contracts, supplier contracts, to say, firstly, to ask questions about what you have in place from a security perspective. And secondly, in a lot of cases, they're actually asking for audit rights, so they can send someone into your business and assess what your security capabilities are.
Have you found yourself doing that for other organisations, going to their suppliers and doing an audit on them?
I haven't done that as an audit, but one of the things that I would always do is take that into account. So a really good example, in a lot of small businesses, they outsource their IT. Their IT, provision of machines, provision of support, management of antivirus and things like that. And I would always want to have a look at the contracts they've got in place. And a lot of it is done on trust. So, and again, it comes back to assumptions. So a lot of small businesses, I would ask them who's responsible for their cybersecurity, and as part of that conversation, how quickly can you get this data back if it's compromised. If a server goes down, for instance.
Crikey. I mean, I remember thinking back when 100 years ago, in truly another lifetime, when I was a computer engineer, and that just shows you how long ago, nearly 100 years ago that was. Abacus and Babbage machines were there at the time, but you would walk onto a customer site and you had complete access, and nobody ever really did anything. You'd be shown in through the door and you had access to all that data. And I would imagine for many engineers, that's probably the same today. They just walk onto a customer site and they will have access to everything.
The IT suppliers perhaps would, and so there's two elements that we always look for in the contracts. One is how we would ask how they manage that access. So does everybody in that have access to your data, or is it managed well? And another huge aspect is, do you have SLAs in place in that contract? There's a lot of assumption that, if I lose a server, well, okay, those guys will just sort it out for me. But do you know how quickly they can do that, and is it quick enough? And it goes back to understanding how quickly you need that back, and then making sure that it is actually in a contract.
And for people who are thinking that when you're talking about SLAs, you're talking about service level agreements.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Very important, I would imagine, actually, for any organisation.
Yeah.
When you're talking to people about, because now it seems I don't know whether what we've just done is we've said you definitely need a burglar alarm because look, I've kicked your kitchen door in and I could have been the thief. But we seem to have created a huge issue here. It's a bigger problem than we all expected. It's very much a case of you don't know what you don't know. And we're talking about our data security in-house, our data security on our external service. We're talking about the data security of our supply chain. It's become a huge issue now that many organisations would probably thought they didn't have a problem. So when you go into businesses, is it difficult to convince the management team of the importance of this?
I think it's difficult to convince sometimes the management team before I go in. I think,
but afterwards you frighten the daylights out of them.
Well, I think but when it gets to the point that I'm actually going in, then at least there's you have at least got some kind of business sponsor within the business who understands that. Yeah, absolutely. But a bigger problem for me is actually getting that message out to people who are really not paying any attention to it, or kind of know it's a problem, but it's not high on their priority list.
Do you see that when you're talking to the different tiers within a business? We were talking before we came on about some organisations who, when they're taking credit card details and things like that, they're not allowed to have any documents next to them or pens. They can use whiteboards effectively, which are instantly erasable, but nothing is takeable away. So they can't collect numbers or reference numbers or anything like that. Everything at the end of the day is gone. Do you find that very difficult convincing and discussing that with employees who are doing those kind of jobs?
I think it depends on how invested the senior management team are in that user awareness program. So having a good user awareness program in place is really critical to the success of a cybersecurity strategy. You really need to help people within your business understand what it is that you're putting in place, and understand why it is that you're putting that in place, and what the potential impact is if you don't do it, to them and to the business. And I think one good way a lot of training organisations look at doing that is to link it back to the personal side as well, because a lot of the aspects of security that apply in the business world also apply to the security of your personal data and the privacy of that.
Very important points. Darren Chapman is my guest today, cybersecurity specialist from Cyberscale. We'll have more from Darren in just a few moments' time here on Business Connections Live. Hope you're enjoying today's show. By the way, if you want to check out his website, I'll show you that in just a few moments' time. If you want to check out our website, do go to businessconnectionslive.com. We are running a series of very successful how to handle the media training courses. If you're interested in finding out more details for that, just drop us an email. The course is actually CPD approved, so continuing personal development. got there eventually. If you go to the website, Studio Business Connections Live, you give us an email, we'll tell you more details about that. The course takes a day. It's worth 6 of your Earth points if you come on the course towards your CBD score throughout the course of the year. It's a very interesting course. We look at everything from how to be interviewed for the television, TV interviews, how to talk directly to a camera, what all the kit in the studio is all about, right down to radio phone-in interviews and also on location. Gordon has just whispered in my ear, you should do that course. Boy, should you do that course, mate. So if you want to find out more, just simply get in touch with us here. He'll be swearing at me in a moment. Get in touch with us here at businessconnectionslive.com. And by the way, thank you very much to all the people who are downloading on a regular basis all the different programs. They are available right across a whole spectrum of different outlets. We've got servers everywhere that are delivering this program, all the way from the North America with Roku, where you can watch the Business Connections Live channel, all the way through to Stitcher, Blueberry, just loads of them out there. If you want to find out more details of all the different places that we're available, thank you very much. The big one, of course, is iTunes. That's somewhere where the program is delivered on a weekly basis. We'd like you to leave a recommendation if you don't mind. Thank you very much. That'll encourage more people to watch the program. It's dead easy. Just log into your iTunes account, find the program, view the programs in iTunes, and you'll see a rating will come up. Say ratings and reviews, a tab rather will come up with ratings and reviews. Click on that. It'll then take you to a section where you can write a review. You can also leave a 5-star review as well. And you can say, Darren Chapman, fascinating program, really found it interesting, has really helped my business. And that will encourage other people to actually watch the program at a later date. So in advance then, I'm saying to you right now, do that today. And thank you very much indeed for doing it for us. You're watching Business Connections Live. It's great to have your company today. We're talking all things cybersecurity. Cybersecurity specialist Darren Chapman's in the studio with me today. Is it something that will differentiate your business from somebody else's business when it comes to how you implement your cybersecurity? If you want to find out more about Darren himself, you can go to his website, Cyberscale. You'll see it here. Cybersecurity data protection will help you prepare and protect your business without getting in the way of doing business, which I think is really important. A lot of people who have done GDPR and cybersecurity and things like that, they seem to be sales prevention or marketing prevention. And what we're talking about here is an organization that understands what your business is about. They're there to help you protect it, how you put your plans into action, and then how you got that ongoing management as well of your cybersecurity. It's dead easy, you know, the guiding principles, as we've already mentioned, that clarity of why you need it, the focus of why it's important and why every business is going to be different. And then the security is a balance. Business needs to be secure and compliant, but also agile and responsive. So they can help you in all aspects of it, everything from assessment, protection services, and also the different programs. So we're not talking about putting a piece of software in. What we're talking about is a complete cybersecurity strategy for your business. And if you want to get in touch with Darren, you can go to the program page for this and you'll find all his contact details going to be on that page. Darren, we've used the word pragmatic IT security a few times. Some people will think, well, what's he talking about when you say pragmatic? Well, is it just taking a logical, sensible approach to all of this and just working your way through it? Do we need you to come in, or are you a last resort when it's all gone hopelessly wrong?
I think so. Pragmatic is really about that balance. That is really what it's about. So it's understanding that you've got competing priorities in a business. So when you're putting security in place, that has to be understood, and you have to balance that, the security side with the agility side. It's really about understanding that for each individual business and putting a plan in place that is pragmatic.
Fantastic. And on our notes, because we always ask our guests to investment but not a cost. Is that real, do you think? And if you are investing into this, what kind of money do you think we should be throwing at it? Is it a percentage of the business? Is it a percentage of the turnover of the organisation? Is there a cheap way of doing it? A cost-effective way of doing it? Are there different scales of it? How much is enough? I mean, how do you approach this when it comes to costing this?
So it's really about taking each business as an individual and basing it on risk, really. So when we understand that first part that we do in terms of understanding the data that you have and the systems that you have, but primarily the data, and understanding what the impact of that to your business is if you don't have it, and also the impact to your clients if it's compromised, that's really how you start to understand how much more effort you need to put around it beyond that initial assessment. There's lots of kind of frameworks in place that can help you as well. So for some organisations, something like Cyber Essentials is going to be a really good starting
people
point.
hear about this and they probably don't understand what Cyber Essentials is all about. What is Cyber Essentials? So
Cyber Essentials is a government standard and it's been put forward. If you look on the NCSC website, which is the National Cyber Security Centre, there's lots of information there, and it's really good starting point, sort of fundamentals to put in place.
Is it the checklist led? Is it?
Yes, it is, but it's primarily technically focused, but it's kind of a good starting point for some organisations, particularly if you don't have a lot of budget. You don't have, you can't necessarily get someone like myself in to do, the overall assessment. Might be a good place to start.
Of all the stories that we've talked about today and all the points that we've covered, do you have any real life experiences where you've gone into an organisation and you've implemented a strategy within the organisation where there have been actual tangible results that have said, yes, this was the right thing to do? You don't have to name, obviously, the organisation or the company, but if you can tell us a bit of the story, that would be fabulous. Yeah,
so tangible results are always difficult, I guess, and this is one of the challenges with cybersecurity.
Because, if nothing's happened to you and you haven't been attacked and you've got away with it, then that's good. Yeah. So nothing happened.
Absolutely. But one of the things that you would put in place from a strategic perspective, as well as the preventative side and as well as the incident response side before you get to the incident, would be some kind of detective controls and monitoring controls, so that you can actually see if things are happening and detect that. And sometimes those things will come to form an incident which you need to deal with, and sometimes you'll be able to see that actually someone's trying to hack you, for instance, and actually the measures that you've put in place have helped you prevent that from happening.
And have you seen any organisation who has put a absolute or a value on the fact that they are cyber secure and have passed that on as an upsell to their clients?
Yeah, so not an upsell necessarily, but certainly I think putting the fact that you are taking security seriously definitely has a value. So we talked about this sort of in a GDPR context earlier on, where if you were looking at that early and you were taking care of your client's data, you could use that almost as a marketing message to say to your clients, look, we are.
And some people did, didn't they? They actually went out there and said, we are now.
Absolutely,
GDPR,
but I think you have to stand behind that, right? You actually have to be doing that. You can't just pay lip service to it. You have to do it. So I think when you're looking at risk in your organisation, as well as looking at the risks to your organisation itself and the reputational damage, really put your clients kind of front and centre of that risk assessment. See what the implications to them is of their data being compromised. Maybe their data being compromised, if it's personal sensitive data, might just be data that you need to provide the service to them not being available. If it's something that they need, if there's something they rely on, and you can't provide that service because you've had a cybersecurity attack that's taken your servers down, it's affected that availability, then that affects them as well. So really thinking about those things, if you can do that, put those front and centre of your risk assessment and of the things that you do to prevent cybersecurity issues, then I think you can genuinely talk to your customers about that and say, this is what we're doing, this is why we're taking it seriously, and if something does happen, because we can't keep it 100% secure, if something does happen, this is how we're going to manage it, and this is our commitment to you.
Like GDPR, everybody thought GDPR, last question by the way, everyone thought GDPR will do it, we've hit the deadline, job done. And it's not the same, is it? Job isn't done. Job is just starting, and it's not the beginning of the end, it's the beginning of the beginning. Is it the same with cybersecurity? Is it something that what we need to be doing is we need to be looking at this on a continuous, ongoing basis. So you don't go in once, you go in regularly.
Yes.
Is that what we need to be thinking in our heads?
Absolutely. I mean, this changes every day. You know, the threats, the types of threats change every day. One of the challenges in security, particularly if you look at taking antivirus as an example, one of the challenges is antivirus companies are always kind of playing catch up with the cyber criminals, and cyber criminals don't have to jump through the same hoops. So if you release a new piece of software or a patent file update, you have to go through a certain amount of testing to make sure that's not going to cause a problem when you release it. Cyber criminals don't have to worry about that, so they've always got a bit of an advantage in that way. So it changes every day. You need to have lots of different protections in place, and they do need to evolve as the threats evolve.
Just out of interest, do you see? I said it was the last question, and there's still another one. do you have a personal favourite when it comes for protection, antivirus protection? Are you a Norton, a McAfee, or are you what's the other one? What's the other free one? AVG, of course, is another one. And do you have a recommendation at all?
No, I don't.
There we go. Oh, well, no mind, eh? Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you found it enjoyable as well. It's been really a real insight into talking about where we should be going and what we should be contemplating. We always ask our guests at the end of every show to look straight down camera number 4, which is that one over there, and just to give us the lowdown, the key takeaways that we need to be remembering. Start by saying who you are and where you're from, and then what we should be remembering as business owners when it comes to the cybersecurity and how it's going to be advantageous to us to make certain that we have got it all sorted out and in the bag. Number 4 is all yours. Who you are and where you're from. The airwaves are all yours.
Thank you, Steve. So, hello, I'm Darren Chapman, and I'm from Cyberscale, and I've been talking today about cybersecurity. Here's my key takeaways. So, firstly, when you're looking at a strategy, a cybersecurity strategy for your business, and it should be a strategy, make sure that you understand what it is that you're trying to protect in your business, whether that's data, whether it's systems, whether it's both, and what the importance of those various aspects are, and how important they are to your business and to your clients and your employees. Put them front and centre of your risk assessment. Put things in place based on risk. Have a strategy that includes process and people, as well as technology. And have an incident response plan in place so that if something does go wrong, because you can't keep yourself protected 100%, make sure that you understand how to deal with that in advance, so that you're not running around like a headless chicken at the time that you've had a data breach or a cybersecurity incident. The way that you manage that will have a huge bearing on how well your organisation comes out of that.
Absolutely fabulous. Thank you very much indeed. A great show today. Darren, thank you very much for being with us as well. Cybersecurity specialist Darren Chapman. We've been talking about using cybersecurity as a differentiator today, and it's been a really interesting program. Hope you found it interesting. If you want to go to his website once again, the website is cyberscale.co.uk. Cyberscale, cybersecurity data protection will help you prepare and protect your business without getting in the way of doing business. Some really good advice on the website. They explain the services that they do for both SMEs and smaller businesses. There's info on there. There's a good blog as well if you want to find out more details. But more importantly, if you just want to contact Darren, just go to his contact page, and in no time at all, I'm sure he'll be picking the phone up to come back to you and have a word with you. Hope you've enjoyed today's program.
Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel.